What's unfolding around the Indiana Fever's coaching situation has been brutally exposed after a nationally televised wake-up call following a 15-point preseason defeat at the hands of the Dallas Wings. While some in the mainstream sports media are trying to frame it as a simple team-wide breakdown, the reality shown by the box score paints a far more alarming picture. Caitlin Clark, in truth, produced an elite-level offensive performance against a high-pressure defense. Yet the context around her performance reveals a far deeper issue. She was left undermined from within. Poor structural decisions from a rigid and overly confident coaching group, combined with a roster that lacks reliable depth, created a situation where her impact was constantly compromised. On top of that, she was put in positions where physical pressure from experienced opponents went unchecked, while internal support around her failed to step up. This is WNBA Pro, the unfiltered and detail-driven space for serious basketball analysis. If you're looking for polished narratives, surface-level reactions, or media-friendly talking points designed to protect reputations, this isn't that. Here, the focus stays strictly on what the numbers and film actually show. Clark's 21-point outing, while efficient and impressive against elite defensive attention, was overshadowed by questionable rotational choices from Stephanie White that disrupted any offensive rhythm. The game also featured a controversial and highly dangerous collision involving Alana Smith that raised serious concerns about player safety. Meanwhile, Kelsey Mitchell's rough performance, reflected in a -18 impact rating, highlighted deeper consistency issues within the rotation. The supposed strength of the Fever's bench unit also collapses under scrutiny, exposing a lack of dependable support when the starters sit. Ultimately, a 95-80 loss like this doesn't just sit in the loss column, it signals structural problems throughout the organization. When you strip away narrative spin and look purely at the statistical foundation, the numbers completely undermine the polished messaging being circulated externally.
Quarter against Dallas, 14 points, 4 for 5 from the field, along with 2 assists, ends the first half with 19 points on a 91 true shooting percentage, 2 assists and 1 steal, 2 3-point made, MVP season loading. Let's take a look at some clips. 291 days since Caitlin Clark played in Gainesbridge Field. Folks, almost an
The Indiana Fever ultimately dropped this 2026 preseason matchup to the Dallas Wings by 15 points, closing it out at 95-80. But the real story emerges only when you break down Caitlin Clark's individual impact in isolation. What she produced wasn't just efficient scoring, it was elite offensive output happening under tight, restrictive coaching control that limited her overall influence on the game. Clark finished with 21 points on an outstanding 66% shooting night, going 4 for 6 from the field and 2 for 3 from beyond the arc. She read the defense at high speed, consistently identified gaps in coverage, attacked driving angles with precision, absorbed contact in traffic, and forced her way to the line an impressive 13 times, converting 11 of those attempts. Beyond scoring, she added 4 assists along with a steal, clearly functioning as the most impactful player on the floor. The striking detail is that all of this production came in just 16 minutes of action, a severely limited workload dictated by coaching decisions. Within that short span, she came out aggressively, putting up 14 points in the opening quarter and reaching 19 by halftime. Her outside shot, which had recently been questioned in media discussions, looked fully restored, while her free throw execution remained steady and reliable. Her scoring pace translated to roughly 1.3 points per minute, an elite rate by any standard. Projected over a normal 30-minute role rather than restricted usage, that output scales into the 35 to 40-point range, even against a defense led by a top-tier defensive anchor. Statistically, that level of production aligns with MVP-level impact, despite external rankings placing her far lower in preseason evaluations. Yet despite this efficiency and momentum, she remained heavily limited by rotational decisions as the game progressed, while the broader team structure failed to maintain control of the contest.
in the third quarter. And we're starting here so I can give my 2 cents to Stephanie White. Stephanie White, after Caitlin Clark comes out on a heater in the first half, comes out on a heater in the first quarter, keeps that momentum going in the second quarter, sit her down. Why are we going to risk injury? Why are we going to risk health of our superstar?
While the most dominant on-ball creator on the floor was dismantling Dallas's top-heavy roster, Stephanie White made the puzzling choice to prioritize a preset rotation plan over actually managing the game in front of her. In doing so, she effectively disrupted the rhythm of an elite offensive system that was clearly operating at a high level. At that point, the context of the matchup needs to be understood clearly. This was a preseason exhibition that carries no standings implications. By the time the third quarter arrived, Indiana's veteran supporting unit had already been overwhelmed, and Dallas, leaning on its primary starters, had built a comfortable double-digit advantage. In a situation like this, the standard coaching decision in any analytical framework is straightforward. You remove your franchise cornerstone from unnecessary minutes, especially in a physical, low-stakes blowout where injury risk outweighs any benefit. Instead, White's decision-making went in the opposite direction. Rather than protecting her primary asset, she reintroduced Caitlin Clark into a game that had already tilted out of reach, exposing her to additional contact in a meaningless stretch of play. The result was a brief, chaotic 2-minute stint in the third quarter that added no strategic value and only increased risk. What should have been a controlled shutdown scenario turned into an avoidable late-game exposure, highlighting questionable judgment in managing star player workload and in-game risk assessment.
Shockingly enough, this was called a flagrant foul. Caitlin Clark goes up for three. Alana Smith slides her leg right underneath in her landing zone, and it was called a flagrant foul. But take a look, folks. Caitlin Clark coming up limping, coming up hobbling.
At the 7:51 mark of the third quarter, the tone of the game shifted after a dangerous and avoidable incident involving Alana Smith and Caitlin Clark. As Clark rose into her shooting motion on a three-point attempt, Smith failed to make a legitimate defensive play on the ball and ended up stepping into Clark's landing area. That kind of foot placement creates a serious risk for any shooter coming down from the air, and Clark landed off balance, appearing to tweak her ankle and fall hard onto her knee area. From a technical standpoint, this is one of the most hazardous situations in basketball. Contesting a jump shot without properly clearing the landing space can lead to lower body injuries that derail a player's season. The immediate concern was the potential severity of the landing, especially given how unstable the contact looked in real time. What stood out just as much was the lack of an immediate physical or emotional response from Indiana in that moment. There was no visible escalation or protective pushback from teammates on the floor, leaving a Heat player exposed to a high-risk situation during a game that was already slipping away in terms of competitive balance.
I don't know if she thinks that her spot's on the line or she's competing for a part in the rotation, but Michaela Timpson has been trying her hardest to put in the work and show that she deserves to be a part of this team. 10 points from Michaela Timpson, 4 for 6 from the free throw line, 2 rebounds, 1 steal, 1 block, only 1 personal foul. Michaela Timpson, she should make this roster. Is she going to be a part of the actual rotation? That remains to be seen. Raven Johnson, defensively...
This is where the supporting cast's performance becomes impossible to ignore when you look at the full statistical picture of the game. Sophie Cunningham, brought in with the expectation of adding veteran toughness and physical presence, ended the night without scoring a single point. She didn't attempt a shot in 14 minutes, offering no offensive contribution and no visible impact in terms of setting tone or protecting teammates during key physical moments. Her plus-minus settled at -6, reflecting a limited influence on both ends. The struggles extended far beyond her line. Kelsey Mitchell endured a particularly inefficient outing, finishing 4 for 12 from the field for 10 points and posting a team-worst -18. That level of impact from a high-usage veteran on a significant contract raises clear concerns about consistency and reliability when the team needs scoring support. Dantas had an especially difficult shooting night, connecting on just 2 of 11 attempts and missing all 8 of her three-point shots. Billings contributed 1 of 5 from the field, while Hines Allen went 2 of 3 in limited opportunities. Walker Kimbrough finished 3 of 7, but none of these individual performances were enough to stabilize the overall offensive flow. Collectively, outside of Clark, Indiana's perimeter efficiency collapsed, with the team shooting just 17.4% from three-point range. That kind of output puts extreme pressure on any primary playmaker, no matter how efficient they are individually, because defensive coverage can fully collapse inward without consequence. Amid all of this, rookie Raven Johnson's role introduces a more complicated evaluation point regarding development, usage, and fit within a rotation that already appears stretched in multiple directions. In 21 minutes of action, Johnson added another layer to the evaluation with 5 assists and 5 steals, showing real impact as a perimeter defender and connector in transition. Her ability to pressure the ball and disrupt passing lanes stands out immediately at the point of attack, and that defensive activity is already at a high level for her role. However, the offensive limitations remain clear. She finished 1 for 3 from the field for just 3 points, and that lack of shooting consistency creates spacing issues that affect how the offense functions around her. The reality is straightforward. Her defense is ahead of her offense right now, and that imbalance makes it difficult for her to be used as a consistent scoring threat in a structured half-court system. That development gap is part of a bigger issue that this loss brings into focus, which is Indiana's overall roster depth. Stripped of the noise, this 15-point defeat highlights a structural problem that becomes obvious when key rotation pieces are unavailable. With Aliyah Boston and Lexi Hull both absent for a second straight preseason game, along with Tanisha Harris also sidelined, Indiana is missing multiple foundational contributors from its normal rotation. Those absences fundamentally change how the team operates on both ends of the floor. Without Boston's screening presence and interior gravity, and without Hull's spacing impact on the perimeter, the offense loses balance quickly. Defenses can compress the paint, overload driving lanes, and force lower efficiency perimeter shots from players who aren't consistent outside shooters. That is exactly what Dallas did here, tightening the defense and forcing Indiana's remaining unit into inefficient possessions. It's important to keep perspective. This is still preseason basketball. Players will shoot better over time, rotations will stabilize, and shooting regression is likely for multiple veterans in a positive direction. Boston and Hull returning to the lineup will also significantly change the structure and spacing of the team.
But this game still exposed a clear dependency. When key rotation players are missing, the margin for error drops sharply, and the system struggles to maintain offensive stability. What makes this situation a real concern for Indiana's front office is the timing and the lack of continuity heading into the start of the regular season. The Fever have just one remaining preseason game on May 2nd, before things shift into full competition mode on May 9th, when they open against the same Dallas Wings in a nationally televised matchup on ABC. That leaves a narrow 9-day window before games begin to count. The issue isn't just the loss itself, it's that multiple key rotation players still haven't shared the floor together in preseason action. That lack of shared minutes limits chemistry, timing, and overall cohesion at the exact moment a team is supposed to be finalizing its identity. From a roster management standpoint, the message to the organization is straightforward. Availability and integration need to be resolved quickly. Aliyah Boston's presence as a stabilizing interior force, Lexi Hull's spacing and wing utility, and Tanisha Harris's role in organizing the second unit are all critical pieces that directly affect how this team functions when games tighten up. If those players are not fully integrated by May 9th, the structural issues seen in this preseason game are likely to repeat under real pressure. In that scenario, Clark's production may remain individually strong. She has already shown she can generate high-volume scoring efficiently even in limited minutes. But basketball outcomes are never decided by one player alone. The supporting structure determines whether that production translates into wins. At this point, the priority for Indiana is less about individual flashes and more about getting a fully functional rotation on the floor before the regular season begins. Now, the responsibility shifts fully to the organization.
The priority has to be simple. Get this roster healthy and properly integrated, because the underlying numbers make one thing clear. When Indiana is at full strength and Clark is playing at the level she showed tonight, this team has the potential to be one of the most dangerous in the league. But the version that showed up short-handed, misaligned in rotations, and unable to protect its key player looked disorganized and got beaten by 15 points in a game that exposed those gaps clearly. The next 9 days will decide which version of this team actually appears when the games begin to count on national television. From here, the questions become unavoidable. Is the current lack of depth enough to derail the season before it starts? Does the league need to take a hard look at that dangerous landing incident involving Smith? And should Indiana reconsider how rigidly its rotation structure is being enforced if it continues to limit flexibility in high-stakes moments? I plan to go through every informed take left in the comments section. Make sure the notification bell is turned on since opening night is just 9 days out. The level of physical intensity on court is rising, and we are counting down each day. Take a look at the exclusive partner links placed directly in the pinned comment below. We focus only on top-tier basketball equipment, and clicking those links is what helps fund this channel. The Revolution airs live